We've been here before. The Muslim world in the early 1950s was under the firm control of Western powers. But then came Mossadegh, and in 1953, with the help of the CIA, the British and the Americans overthrew him. Ever since, the Iranian has become synonymous with the heroic leader taken down by sinister Western powers. And then there's Nasser. He led the Egyptians to victory against the British in 1956 when they nationalized the Suez Canal. He also dreamt of a united Arab state, a Pan-Arab state stretching from Morocco to Iraq. He too is celebrated as a champion of the Arab world, a symbol of resistance against imperialism. Then we come to Qaddafi. At first, he was famous for his revolutionary socialist rhetoric and his anti-colonial struggles. In the 1970s and the 80s, he was seen as the man who took on the might of the West, who refused to be a pawn in their game. And finally, there were the Algerian freedom fighters, Ben Bella and Boumediene. They led a long and bloody anti-French guerrilla war. And in 1962, they won. They established a military dictatorship and ruled the country for years. Now let me ask you something. Do any of these names ring a bell? Well, if they do, then you're probably like me. You've heard their names, but you don't know much about what they did. It's almost as if their stories have been erased from history. And that's not because they weren't important. It's precisely because they were important. When you read their stories, you realize that they were larger-than-life figures. They became symbols. They represented hope in a time of despair, resistance against overwhelming odds. And most importantly, they represented the possibility of change. For millions of Muslims across the world, they became beacons of hope, proof that one day things could be different. But more often than not, those very leaders ended up betraying the people they claimed to represent. Take, for instance, Ben Bella and Boumediene. They fought the French to win Algeria's independence. But once they won, they turned on the very people who had helped them win. The irony is not lost on anyone. They had fought for freedom and won, but then they imprisoned and tortured those very people whose freedom they had fought for. The same story played out in Egypt. Nasser used the Arab masses to gain power, but soon he turned on them. His secret police spied on his own people. His regime was responsible for some of the worst violence against civilians. And in Iran, Khomeini's Islamic revolution toppled the Shah, but it also unleashed a wave of violence against the very people who had supported the revolution. And Qaddafi, well, he switched sides. In the 1980s, he turned his back on socialism and embraced capitalism. By the end of his life, he was a staunch ally of the West. Now, you could argue that these leaders were products of their times. The Muslim world was in a state of flux. It was a time of decolonization, of Cold War rivalries, of mass poverty, and the leaders who emerged at that time were larger-than-life figures. They promised change and they delivered. But their methods were often ruthless. They used violence, they employed secret police, and they crushed dissent. Today, there's a tendency to either celebrate or condemn them. Some historians see them as heroic freedom fighters who led their people to independence and self-determination. Others see them as authoritarian populists who betrayed the very people they claimed to represent. Well, I'll leave it here. This is a big topic and I haven't done justice to it. But I want to end by saying this. We've been here before. The Muslim world in the early 1950s was under the firm control of Western powers. And then came Mossadegh, and then came the coup. And that story has become a myth. We tell it to ourselves to explain the state of our politics today. And that story will continue to be relevant till we rewrite it.